Okay, U.S. history. This is our lecture for Thursday, September 17th. Couple things. So I don't know if you'll be watching this before or after our live meet. Oh, our live meet's Friday, so it'll definitely be before, hopefully. But your tests and essays were all due by 1:15 on Thursday. I should have your test results in pretty quick. I would think by the end of the day, Thursday, in progress book. Whatever I put in progress book is your official grade. The form may have kicked back a grade to you. I'm not sure if it will or not. That is actually not your official grade because there are some things I do, a curve that I put to it. And so I will go through a little bit more of that explanation on Friday's live session. The essays will take me a little bit longer. I certainly cannot foresee, unless something really weird happens, me not having it done. Oh, I'm going to set a timer, by the way, so I don't babble on too long. I can absolutely see having it done by the end of the weekend. I'll try to do them by Friday, but I just don't know if I can get that much done that fast. A lot of times the first essays take a little bit. But when I get them in, just keep an eye on progress book. I can't imagine not having them in by Monday morning at the very latest. Knock on wood. That said, hopefully now it makes sense about the point system. So you had a 5-point quiz, pop quiz the other day. You have a 30-point essay and you have a 65-point test. Put that all together, you've got 100 points. That unit is done. You do want to not completely forget that material, but that material will not come up again until I say, okay, we're having this semester review test or this year review test. I'll specifically mention to it. For basically the next few units moving forward, you just worry about that particular unit. And each unit is 2 chapters. Unit 1 was chapter 1 and 2. Some people in the past have gotten confused and thought it was called the half unit, 1/2. And the next unit would be, I guess, the 3/4 unit. No, it's chapter 3, chapter 4, so on and so forth. So don't worry about that. Don't get overwhelmed. I know that in today's lesson, you have all of these documents and this assignment and all this stuff. You have everything but the take-home test. This is a more traditional unit. So you've got the supplementals that'll help you with the essay, and you've got this essay assigned, and then of course you've got your reading assignments, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe all this. Again, I won't give you anything new other than a pop quiz until the test. And honestly, I have to look at my lesson plans. I don't remember what day this unit ends. I will put that in the notes or in the Google Classroom, because that's when the day before it ends is when your essay is due. And then the day your essay is collected, we play the review game, and the next day we take the test, then that unit's over. Start the whole thing again. So let's talk about, before we get into your essays in general. I told you earlier that there are 2 writing themes that we want to hammer all year. The first one is back up your assertions with facts. So you said the Spanish were mean. Hopefully you provided specific examples. You said the English pushed them west. Hopefully you provided specific examples. You say Mr. Penrose is mean. You say, oh, he stepped on my toe. He made me cry. You provide specific examples. That still holds true. That's always true for history essays. That stays true moving forward. What we're adding to that now is a thesis. So we're going to be writing traditional essays. Most of your essays are going to be like this particular one, where you have, and well, I don't even want to show it to you yet, but you have a prompt. You have a prompt that is several sentences long, and you say, oh my gosh, how am I going to answer this? Your task, and at first, it can take a lot of time to do this, but eventually you're going to be able to do this in 45 minutes and write it, because that's what you'll have in the AP exam. But your task is to take all these questions that seem like they're not quite related and give me a preview paragraph in the intro that tells me what your main thesis is, then your body paragraphs to support that, and then your conclusion, which tells me what you told me. Most of you have had me before. You know how I kind of like that, and we're probably going to mess around in the live session with a quick 5-paragraph essay where we go, oh, why is Cedar Point awesome? Oh, rides, food, and beach. And then you give me 3, you say, oh, your thesis is Cedar Point's awesome because it has great rides, great food, and a wonderful beach. And then each body paragraph deals with those things. That's sort of the simplified version that I give you guys in honors. In AP, the concept is still the same. However, it's just not always 5 paragraphs. Sometimes it's a 7-paragraph essay. Sometimes it's an 8-paragraph essay. You're going to take the main topics, and they will be the body paragraphs. but you still have to, in your thesis, sort of tie all of that together. That could be pretty tough. And still, while you're doing that, any assertion you make, you back up with facts. So let's take a look at some of our supplements. Stop being stuck looking at me. Let's share screen with some of these supplements and see if we can make this make sense. Oh, this is great. I don't see them anywhere. Nope, not there, not there. So let's not do that. Don't you love it when you get to hear the teacher try to figure it out as they teach? My apologies. Oh, I see why it's not there. Okay. So we'll try this now. I apologize, guys. This is so horrible. All right. Let's take a look at this essay prompt. So this is your essay prompt. Now, there are some other documents you have. Two are just study guides. They are a good thing for you to use. Forget how they're worded, but I think it's probably study guide for chapter 3 and chapter 4, and it lists like some vocabulary words and some concepts. There's no assignment with that. There is no task to do with that. I suggest to you that before we take our test, which will be sometime about 7 to 8 class days away, again, I'll post that. You look at that and go, oh, I know this, I'm good, or oh, I don't know that. It's just a study guide. It's just exactly what it sounds like. But there is no task with that. Then there are 4 pages of supplements. These just help, and actually the reference in the essay, you write this. And I know it's a pain to get supplements. I never liked them in college either. It's better than the alternative, which is giving you other books. So in other words, some AP teachers will say, okay, here's your textbook, and here's supplemental book A and supplemental book B, and you have readings from all this. I'll give you these pages when I want you to read them. So let's read through the essay and see if we can piece this together. But remember, the essay is not supposed to make sense yet. I just want you to know how we're going to grade it so you can start thinking about how you'll put it together. And maybe you even re-watch this portion of the video then. But you don't know this material yet. And I did tell you that I would try to make the essays about sort of the first chapter. This actually is in chapter 4, but the very beginning of chapter 4. So this is a big essay. I think it can be written in 5 paragraphs, but I'm not a paragraph Nazi in that if you want to organize it a different way, as long as it makes sense, that's fine. But I'm going to treat you like middle schoolers here and read the prompt to you. But actually, I have you guys read the prompt in class if we were here in a regular session. So we're going to briefly discuss the resentment of indentured servants and speculate how fair you feel the system was. Then you're going to use your readings, number 3 and number 4, on page 43 of your American Spirit Reader. Okay, I didn't give you an American Spirit Reader. I just took photos of those and made copies of those, and those are posted. So number 3 and number 4 are on 1 page, okay? And all they are is 2 very brief stories about punishments given to indentured servants. So I'll come back to that, but that's all that's referencing, okay? To help you with this portion. This perceived mistreatment was coupled with an apparent lack of concern of the safety of several colonies from attacks by Native Americans. Using the story of the bloody escape of Hannah Dustin, a cultural reader from American Voices, American Lives, discuss how intense this frustration was. Now, I called that HD sup or supplement, something like that, and I think there are 3 pages because it's kind of lengthy that explain her basic story. That's what I'm referring to. So you don't have to find American Voices, American Lives, okay? Another reader. I just made the attachments for you because I thought that was easier than another book. And then finally explain how the preceding factors led to Bacon's Rebellion and how this in turn led to increased slavery. Okay. Even though it's a 30-point value of your essay, like the AP exam or many of the essays, I'm going to grade it on a 9-point scale and convert it, which means I'm looking for 9 major things. Now, there are multiple things within some of the points, but you're going to get the idea. So let me give you the first point, and I would literally write this down. And in class, I would say, hey, write this down, and most people would write this down. You're going to get 1 point out of the 9 for simply writing a good intro and a good conclusion. Now, a good intro is going to have a thesis, which is going to preview your answers to the questions. In other words, your intro is going to preview your answer to questions like, Did indentured servants think it was fair? How were colonials treated? How did they feel about attacks on the frontier? That sort of thing. Those questions are, you're not going to answer them all in the intro. You're going to give me an idea of how you will be answering them throughout the body of the essay. And then at the end, you're going to have a conclusion. And that conclusion is going to remind me of what you thought, of what you had told me in the body paragraphs. So you get 1 point just for having a good intro and a good conclusion. Okay. I personally, but you can organize it differently, would write this as a 5-paragraph essay. So I would do the intro. Okay. Body paragraph 1 then. I would answer this question. Describe the resentment that many indentured servants felt. And you can do this by using the stories from number 3 and number 4, which is in that one supplemental. You must use one direct quote where you literally say, reading number 3, comma, quote, and then you give me a quote from that to demonstrate your understanding of this. Direct quote, not indirect, like as in comma, quote, and give me the exact words from it. But from 3 or 4, you don't have to use both. I want that sort of built into your explanation. So that first paragraph is going to say, looking at this example, you can see that people might have thought, might have been resentful because of this punishment that happened in this event. That's 1 point for using a direct quote and 1 point for describing whether or not they resented it. Hint, they did. Now, whether or not you think it's fair is also part of that, okay? That's opinion. Most are going to probably say it's unfair. Some of you are going to say it's fair and you can justify it. That's fine, but you have to explain that. So all within that first body paragraph is going to be essentially whether or not you think the system is fair, whether they thought it was fair, and how resentful they were of it. So you're just sort of setting the stage. This is what indentured servitude looked like. And you're going to give a specific example from 3 and 4. So far we have 3 points, right? So I would make the next paragraph about how frustrated colonials were in general, okay? So we know that indentured servants are frustrated. Not all colonials are indentured servants. But some people then, once they're freed indentured servants, move to the frontier, okay? And there was a quote, this is from the essay, an apparent lack of concern for the safety of several colonies or colonials from attacks by Native Americans. So I want you to tell me, how frustrated were these colonists because they weren't being protected by the government from attacks by Native Americans? Now, you don't get the connection yet, but when you're an indentured servant, when you win your freedom, you're probably then going to move to the frontier because you're free now, but you don't have any land. That's not part of the deal. The land goes to the guy that brought you over. So it's the same group of people in the 2 paragraphs. It's just different stages of their life. So these freed indentured servants become colonists that live on the frontier. And so you get 1 point for telling me how frustrating their life was. And here is where we're going to use the Hannah Dunstan story. Hannah Dunstan's family, they're colonists living on the edge of the frontier. They're living right up against Native American tribes. They had been indentured servants previously. They now had their own home and their own homestead and had made a nice little life for themselves. And then Hannah goes through this awful thing. It's a very depressing thing. It's 3 pages. There's not going to be any test questions on that. But you have to understand that story because it helps you understand, by way of this one specific example, how frustrating it could be to be on the frontier. So for that, I give you another point just to give me all the details of Hannah's story. Like, give me the rundown, what basically happened to Hannah. Then also, when explaining this, what happened to Hannah, give me at least 1 direct quote from her story. Again, take something from that story that stood out to you, and as you're explaining it, say, comma, quote, and give me the exact words, because that's one of your points on your rubric. Use a direct quote while explaining Hannah Dunstan's story. And put that in that paragraph, okay? So we've got an intro, which is going to give me an idea of how you're going to come down on all these questions. You've got a body paragraph that says something along the lines of, indentured servitude is or is not fair in my opinion, and why. Regardless of what your opinion is, indentured servants felt it wasn't terribly fair, or at least resented the system. And then you're going to use a direct quote from that supplemental, either number 3 or number 4, which are on the same page, and you're going to tell me, given a good example of why they resented it. New paragraph. Talk about the frustration of these freed indentured servants, once they become colonists living on the frontier. Talk about, in general, there was a frustration. And then use Hannah Duston's story to express the bigger idea. This is a really good example of the sort of thing that was going on all along the frontier. And then also use a direct quote. That's a paragraph. Third body paragraph. You are basically being asked, how did all of this then lead to Bacon's rebellion and this lead to slavery? So what you need to do then is tell me a little bit about Bacon's rebellion. Some basics. You don't just say, oh yeah, then there was this Bacon's rebellion. You might want to mention a few things like, people and years. Now again, this does not have to be like a 12-page essay. I imagine most people are going to write 2 to 3 pages, maybe 4. I'm not going to put a page number on it, because I actually have had people write 1.5 pages and get a 9, and people who've written 10 pages and get a 5. It's just how well you answer the questions. That's all I can tell you. Answer the questions thoroughly and it should all work out. There's no need for you to double space or make the font a different size because you're trying to hit a certain page number. I not only know all those games, I've played all those games. So just answer the question. But give details about Bacon's rebellion. Talk about what happened in Bacon's rebellion, and then tell me how the result of Bacon's rebellion led to increased slavery. So Bacon's rebellion is worth a point. How that leads to increased slavery is worth a point. If you go back, you should have 8 points so far. If you skip something, like you don't talk about Bacon's rebellion, well, then you're probably going to miss the last 2 points, because you can't get Bacon's rebellion point, and you can't talk to me about how Bacon's rebellion led to increased slavery, because obviously they talk about Bacon's rebellion. So make sure you hit all those points. You might miss half a point because you explain it, but maybe not to meet my standards. And we'll talk about this, and we'll get better and better at this. So you have 8 points, but it's a 9-point essay. One last thing. Most of my essays are going to require that you add something from your own research, something I don't provide you. I call it an outside resource, an OR, for your essay. It's not a big deal. You provide some detail that I can't have, that you didn't find in the Bailey textbook or the supplements I gave you. So it's something you looked up, probably on the internet, that added to it. Maybe it's how many people died in Bacon's rebellion. Maybe it's how many total slaves. If that might be in the text, I don't know. Double check, make sure it's not in the textbook. And by the way, if you don't read the textbook, and that's why you didn't know your outside resource is exactly what's in the book, you don't get credit. Read the book. But you give me, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's some specific fact, something we can verify that you have added to this essay. Again, just ideas. How many people died in Bacon's rebellion? If you do a little research, you'll find out there's some of the major players in Bacon's rebellion are related, and they don't mention it in the book. You could talk about something to do with the overall slave picture. It has to be something specific, just a little fact, and it has to be cited. Now I'm going to be real easy on the citation. After you put in this fact, you're just going to put in parentheses your outside source. So, which by the way, can never, ever, ever, make sure you can hear this, ever be Wikipedia. But, because remember, Wikipedia, there are now 3 entries on Wikipedia at different times that have me founding various communist parties, which I did not, especially the ones in 1890 and 1903. But anyway, a valuable, real outside source, History Channel, something like that, and a fact that we can verify that's relevant to the discussion. I don't want you at the end to say, oh, and here's my outside resource. Abe Lincoln was 6'4". Cool, that's true. Not relevant to any of the topics here. Right? So something about maybe Hannah, that would probably be hard to find. Something about indentured servitude, something about Bacon's rebellion, something about slavery, something that enhances your essay because you added this extra fact. It's only worth 1 point, so don't kill yourself over that. And you work it in there, and it has to be cited. If it's not cited, if you tell me later on, oh, I forgot to cite it, here's where I got it, you don't get any credit for it. It has to be cited, or there's no credit for it. and you just cite it by, you don't have to do a bib or a citations page, just put in parentheses after you use that fact where you got that fact from. Okay, this is all very confusing. Oh, and then you end with a conclusion. So that's how I have the 5 paragraphs set up. I have had people turn this in as a 7-paragraph essay and get 9s on it. I've had people turn that in as a 4-paragraph essay, and it was confusing, but they got 9s on it. I think, to me, logically, it plays out to organize it as I described it, but I'm not a paragraph Nazi. What I'm going to do is go through and say, did you answer this? Did you give the direct quote that I asked you here? Did you have an intro and conclusion? Did you have an outside resource? Did you cover all of these 9 things that I loosely covered with you? And did you cover them in enough detail? If you did, then you are going to get, I'm not looking at my phone to take a call. I'm looking at the phone for the timer, 20 minutes just for that, yikes. Then you're gonna get the score you deserve, okay? It's a little intimidating right now. It should become more clear as we explain these topics and I teach these topics to you. And then you're gonna go, okay, now it all makes more sense. Come along with me as we take, page by page, section by section, and hopefully you will get to the right place. It is not weird for you to not be there yet. That I will put the due date for in the Google Classroom. I imagine it's about a week. I will make sure I put that in there though. And you can ask me with questions about that tomorrow. Today we are going to hit a few more pages. I will promise not to do more than 20 minutes, hopefully less than 20 minutes. And then we'll just give you a few reminders and be done. So I could stop sharing, I think. So remember, that's a lot, but you're not doing that essay yet. All you're doing right now is keeping up on your reading. Oh, it's really cool that I lost my place in the book. You are just keeping up on the reading, and you're reading for great detail. Because remember, that test you had as a take-home test, that's how hard this next test is going to be, except you won't have the benefit of however many days or hours you had to take it. I'm going to tell you with plenty of warning, the test day is going to be this particular day, and you are going to take it at a specific time. I believe your class is 1:15 to 2. Yeah, I think that's it. And that's when the test will be. It won't pop up into your classroom stream until 1:15. By the way, I have to schedule it on this thing, so it might be 1:16, but it pops up about 1:15 or 1:16, and then I'll give you warnings on Google Classroom, but I'm shutting it down at whatever time I tell you I'm shutting it down at. So read for detail, because you got to know your stuff. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about chapter 3. So I'm in chapter 3 in your textbook. My textbook's off a few pages of yours because I have an older copy. But essentially, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Protestant Reformation because we did a little bit the other day. Yes, I talk with my hands a lot, sorry. You get the idea that there was this great schism in the church, and that we had a split, a schism, where there are those who believed within the Christian faith that the Pope was the ultimate authority, and those who believed that the Bible was the ultimate authority, but they both hold the same basic tenets of Christianity. Right? Catholics that stick with the Pope, Protestants who are Christian but have, and there's a lot of different Protestant faiths, but in general what they have in common is they don't recognize the authority of the Pope. Although in many cases, respectful to the Pope, just don't recognize them as the ultimate authority. So in England, there's a lot of struggle over this because different monarchs had different sort of stands. Elizabeth, very much Protestant. Some of the people that followed Elizabeth to the throne, more Catholic. And so they kind of, at different times, it's kind of dangerous. I shouldn't say kind of, it's dangerous to be a Catholic sometimes in England, and it's dangerous sometimes to be a Protestant in England. Because of the English colonies, sometimes when one of those groups felt like it wasn't safe to be in England, it felt like you could go to the colonies and have a little bit better of a chance of having religious freedom. But to be real clear, how we define religious freedom today is very different from how they defined it then. For a lot of people back then, religious freedom meant you could be Catholic or Protestant. We now perceive religious freedom, rightfully so, to be you have the right to be any religion you want or no religion at all. But back then, many places, particularly early on, were executing you for being something other than Protestant or Catholic. One particular group that did not like how things are going in England are called the Puritans. Puritans get their name from the fact, the idea, that they think that the King, Henry VIII, when he made the Church of England, it's too Catholic. It is very Catholic because remember, Henry VIII, I told you, was the defender of the Catholic faith. He only created the Church of England because he wanted to give himself the authority to divorce so he could have a male heir. The church was really, really set up to be very, very similar to the Catholic Church, but Puritans emerged in England saying, no, 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 we need to purify, that's the word, the Church of England of all of its Catholic influences. When we have a king who is much more friendly to Catholic influences, you have Puritans in England saying, we got to get out of here. They're extreme Puritans, they're separatists. But when they first leave, they don't go to the New World. They go to Holland. But they leave Holland because of a word I'm pretty sure Bailey made up, the Dutchification of their children. You see, they went to Holland in, 1608, but they didn't like that their kids were becoming too Dutchified, the Dutchification of their children. I don't know, people were running around wooden shoes like crazy or what, I don't know. But what these Puritans then said was, no, 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 we want our children to grow up English, but we don't want them to grow up under the influence of the Church of England. So what we're going to do is go to the New World. Now, this is after Jamestown, of course. These groups, these Puritans who are going to go, are going to be better equipped for the journey. They're still going to have their struggles for sure. But many of the people who went to Jamestown really were there as much a part of the investment, trying to make money, which is why some of them were off looking for gold instead of planting food. Whereas these people, these Puritans, are going to be in search of a place to raise their family the way they see fit. By the way, they don't want that for anybody else's family. They want them, they have their own ideas, but that's neither here nor there. So these people board the Mayflower. Now, this is a little quirk in history as far as I'm concerned, but there are some people with great pride, and I don't begrudge them this, who could trace their heritage all the way back to the Mayflower. That's a big deal. If you can trace your heritage back to the Mayflower, you've been here a long time. I'm not in that group. My grandfather, very Irish and not 3 or 4 years old when he came over. There's not a long history for me. But I just wonder why people don't say, oh, I can trace my heritage all the way back to the one that was before the Mayflower, the settlement before Plymouth, Jamestown. And I guess that's probably because nobody wants to say there's a decent chance my ancestors ate other people. Either way, the Mayflower, 65-day journey across the ocean, a little fast, took 2 or 3 months. That's on the quick side of things, 2 months at that time. One person died on the way there, way less than had died on the way to Jamestown. One person was born on the way there. Oceanus, I think was her name. So you end up with 102 people, and they are under the direction of Captain Miles Standish, who the book calls, because they called, Captain Shrimp, because he's not real tall. Rude. I won't touch that anymore, but they signed this thing called the Mayflower Compact, which is just, sometimes I think it's overplayed in history because it's not like this amazing document. It simply says, we're going to rule by the majority. And the concept is very important. It's one of those things that we look at and say, we got to start here to democracy. But who gets the vote, who makes up the potential majority is very, very limited. But we'll come back to that. The early days of the Pilgrims were also harsh. In the first winter, only 44 out of 102 survived. So that's roughly 42% survival rate, a little less than that. That's better than Jamestown. But after that, the survival rate is much better because they're able to establish homesteads, establish crops. They establish trade based on beaver pelts. That ends up being a huge thing, becomes a fad in the New World, or excuse me, in Europe eventually. And what you have is, according to Bailey, these Puritans doing so well because they're on the foundations of beaver pelts and Bibles. So their religious fervor is making them determined to stay. They're there with their families. They're not there looking for money. They're trapping beaver to use as a way to sort of sustain the colonies, but they are doing much better than Jamestown. Other Puritans then start to follow. They talk about the Bay Colony in particular, Massachusetts Bay Colony. Boy, these people were even more prepared, came over with more people, more supplies, more foodstuffs. People started to realize from the mistakes of the early colonies, oh, it's going to be a year before you can plant food and then have the benefits of that crop. So we better bring even more food with us. And so Massachusetts Bay Colony, particularly successful. There's a graphic in your book, and it says from England, about 70,000 Puritans leave. Really, a lot of them went to the West Indies. I'm going to guess, don't know for sure, weather. I mean, if you gave me a choice of, do you want to go to Connecticut or do you want to go to the Bahamas? Bahamas, please. In these colonies, in the Bay colonies, what you have is this beginning of separation of church and state, but just the beginning. Because, for example, you had to be a member of the church to vote. So we're not going to call that separation of church and state. But if you were a preacher, you could not serve office. So you just, again, there's so many things here where you have the beginning, just the seedlings of what we think of as the rights that evolved. And here are these people who decided to basically, like, virtually, it seems like, go to another world, like go to another planet today would be almost the equivalent, also that they can have the religion that they see fit. Now, again, they want religious freedom to establish a community based on their perception of what is right in religion. It doesn't mean they want you to have that right. And so at first, everything's very much in line. They went over together. But then you start to see groups develop, like the Quakers, so named because they shook with religious fervor when they spoke and got really excited about their ideas. Quakers had these other ideas. And they're like, well, hold on, why are you in charge? Maybe we should have, and well, that does not go over well. They're like, oh, we traveled thousands of miles to risk our lives, lost all these people so that we could be Puritans. So they're not terribly interested in religious ideas that are antithetical to their own. One of the people that exemplifies this is Anne Hutchinson. To understand one thing about the Puritans, and again, I'm not judging them, and I want to make sure I'm not going too long here. I don't judge religious ideas. We're 31 minutes. I don't judge religious ideas. It's not my job. You have to understand, though, some of these religious ideas to understand where some of the conflicts happen. Puritans believed in this thing called predestination. Not many religions believe in it today. If you do, that's fine. But predestination is the idea, just like it sounds. Your fate is predetermined. It's done. If I'm going to get hit by a dump truck in 2042, I'm going to get hit by a dump truck. And everything I do to try to avoid that fate will make that very fate happen. Okay? That's predestination. Puritans at that time absolutely believed in predestination. Anne Hutchinson is a Puritan who believes in predestination. But she takes it a step further and says, she's introducing this idea, antinomianism. Because, in her mind, everything's predetermined, I don't have to listen to your rules because whether I go to heaven or HE double hockey sticks has already been determined. So I can ignore you if I want. I don't have to follow your rules. I don't have to, eventually, the concept is placed further, pay your taxes. I don't have to do anything you tell me to do. Whether this ends good or bad for me, it's already written. It's already predetermined. Ergo, I'm ignoring you. Oh, the Puritans do not know what to do with her. So they banish her. That is a direct challenge to their line of thought. This predestination is going to come up again and again. Because, for example, Puritans believe that you get told through a religious experience, usually in your teens, of whether or not you get to go to heaven. And if you are, you're part of this group called the elect. And Puritans do not want to sit in church with non-elect. So in other words, if Puritans sense back in England that you're not a very devout religious person, they think that you're predetermined to not go to heaven. Ergo, they don't want to sit with you because they believe that they are predetermined to go to heaven. So this predestination thing is going to come up again and again and again, which is why I explained it. They banish Anne Hutchinson. She, by the way, with all of her children, almost all of her children, I think one survives, get murdered by Native Americans, which of course, Puritans said, of course she did. That was predetermined. Roger Williams is another person who starts challenging the religious authority. He gets banished. to Rhode Island. Your book is going to make the point that Rhode Island, because it's pretty rocky and hard to farm, and North Carolina, because the way it develops with its pirates, these become two of the most independent colonies of all of the British colonies. And there are more than 13 British colonies. There's just 13 that end up revolting. But he ends up going to Rhode Island, and he says, I think everybody ought to have complete religious freedom to be whatever religion they want. We're not going to execute anybody for being any religion. Jewish, atheist, Quaker, all are welcome. And he establishes what many would consider the first Baptist church. And this is a big milestone. So you start to see, again, a little bit of movement towards religious freedom, but not everywhere. And then finally, in your textbook, our last point today, you have this map. Oh, are you going to be able to see this? On page 50, 52, of sort of where all of these little religious groups end up spreading to. And they talk about Plymouth and Rhode Island and New Haven and Massachusetts Bay and Maine and New Hampshire and all these different little sections. What all these emerge from, and you can read the details in that last section of your reading, is that you have a group of people who say, well, I'm going to go over here because this is how I perceive the Bible. This is how I interpret my Puritan faith. And then for maybe 20 years, they're good. But then emerges another idea within that group, and they have their own little split. And so then that group says, I can't be here anymore. And then they start their own colony over here. They're all basically, most of them are Puritan. They have different versions of their Puritan faith, which is why they split off. When push comes to shove, the Puritan colonies are going to stick together, except when it comes to a colony like, say, Rhode Island or North Carolina, for that matter. They're a little bit more willing to let them be on their own because they perceive them to be as valuable as their own people of their own like mind. So that is enough for today. We have lots to do in our live session. There's also a constitutional video. It is the law that I teach you, the Constitution, on Constitution Day today, Thursday, September 17th. And so, of course, I did. That little video is supplemented there. We'll get to the Constitution in future units as well. And I touch upon one of my most prized possessions. Possession is a weird way to put it. The tattoo of the Constitution on my back, which I can't show, very inappropriate, but does have all 7 articles and all 27 amendments, which is no small feat. We're talking over 4,403 words, I think. I didn't do it all once. It was over time. So, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, hope all is well with you, and I look forward to our live Friday session. And I think Friday, too, we'll have you, I'll post the Friday Fun Day video. Obviously, I'm not going to have my feelings hurt if you don't watch that. You can watch my wife almost get seasick as we film it, because we film it on a boat that feels like it's about to sink. So it's kind of funny. All right, everybody, have a great day.